Welcome to our reflection for Sunday, the 11th of October, where we join together in an autumn contemplation. As always, I light our chalice candle. And begin with words by Seth Carrier-Ladd. Wind that whispers through the willow trees, sun that sustains us and warms us, water that washes over willing earth and weathered stones, a smile shared and savoured, a child's squeal of delight as she dances in the fallen leaves, and the quiet joy of gathered community. This is the spirit of life and love that we welcome into this gathering. May this spirit infuse our hearts, fill our souls, and carry us forward like a wave on the ocean as we enter now into this sacred time and space. And so with words by John Saxon, I invite you to join me in a time of prayer and reflection, to be fully present here and now in this sacred time and space, with ourselves, with each other, with that which is larger than ourselves. Source of all life, all love, all hope, known by many names and in many ways. We don't know who or what you are, or even whether you can be called a who or what. Our words fail us. Our minds fail us when we ponder the enormity, diversity, complexity, wonder and beauty of the universe and this world. And yet we sense, more than know, that our lives are part of a larger life, that we are indeed connected with everyone and everything in one interdependent web of being, and that there is something, both immanent and transcendent, that nurtures and sustains our lives and life itself. Something that calls us and all life to greater wholeness and harmony. We give thanks this morning for all of the gifts and blessings of life, for this day, for the beauty and wonder and mystery of life, for our families and friends, for health and work, for opportunities to learn and love and grow, for the love and support of others in times of illness or despair. But we remember too that others, here in this community, in this city, and around the world, live in poverty, hunger, fear, illness, isolation, violence, and economic insecurity. In the quiet of this room and in the quiet of our hearts, may we hear the call to a wider perspective and a deeper resolve. May we live with greater compassion and care for ourselves, others, and creation. May we touch each other more deeply, hear each other more clearly, and see each other's joys and sorrows as our own. May we strive to be and become more than we are, more loving, more forgiving, more kind, more honest, more open, more connected, more whole. May we heal and be healed. May we face the uncertainties and tragedies of life with hope, faith, and courage, knowing that life is good and that we are not alone. Amen. Our story this week is by Lynn Gardner, and it's called Sustaining the Tree of Life. The tree stood in the middle of the village. Its trunk was so large that it took 6 people holding hands to reach around it. The roots were strong and wide, and its branches spread out over the village square, offering shelter from the rain or shade from the summer sun. Its fruit was juicy, sweet, and plentiful. The people of the village loved the tree. Children played beneath it and climbed in its lower branches. Young people knew that if you whispered your dreams to the tree, they were more likely to come true. People who proclaimed their love or friendship for one another beneath its branches found their relationships to be nourishing, and elders discovered that their sweetest memories could be counted on when they were near the great tree. The tree had been witness to so much, and when the breezes blew through the leaves, one could hear echoes of generations, laughter, conversations, dreams, prayers, and songs. Animals loved the tree too. Rabbits lived in burrows under the roots, squirrels and monkeys lived in the branches, and bats and birds flew in to eat the abundant fruit. The tree seemed to buzz with life. One day, a travelling merchant arrived in the village, and he rested in the shade and ate 2 pieces of delicious fruit. "This fruit is incredible," he said. "I would like to have some to sell in the next village that I visit. Who owns this tree?" "No one owns this tree," replied a villager. "If anything, we belong to it." "Oh, well then if no one owns the tree, then no one will mind if I pick the fruit," said the merchant, and began to fill a basket. "I mind," said the villager, "and today I am keeper of the tree." "What do you mean, keeper of the tree?" "We each take our turn being here with the tree. We could never own it. We're here as protectors, as sustainers." "Well, that's ridiculous. This tree doesn't need you. You could just take what you need, take what you want. The tree will continue." But the villager couldn't be persuaded. "Sir, this tree isn't like that. We don't come here to take from it, even though we receive much. We are keepers of the tree because this is where we are nourished. This is where some of our most precious memories are, and where our people have dreamed. This is where we remember who we want to become." "Well," said the merchant, "you may think this tree is very special, but it still doesn't need you to sit with it. I mean, that's preposterous." "Ah," replied the villager, "well, the tree itself may not need me. But what of others who come by? Just this morning I sat with a woman whose heart was heavy with worry. Had I not been here, she would have had to carry that weight alone. And this afternoon a tired couple came by and they rested with me. They said they'd been looking for a place like this. And then an elder came by and we watched the birds in the branches together. And now you are here. You were confused about what this tree is and how to be with it. Imagine if you had arrived and not found anyone here to talk with. You might have continued thinking that everything you do is all about you. Luckily for you, my friend, I'm here to let you know that when you care for the tree of life, it becomes about so much more than just you." And the merchant sat for a while in the shade, thinking about these ideas that felt new and a little challenging. As the sun went down, he picked up his bag and headed out of town, whistling a song that he hadn't thought of in years. On his way, he shared a smile with each person he met, his heart feeling strangely light and joyful. And the people of the village? They continued to sustain the tree of life, to care for one another, and to share their gifts with grace and gratitude. May it be so for each of us. And to follow that, a reading by Barbara Road, called The Miraculous Picture. During the hot Nebraska summers of my childhood, I spent hours high in my treehouse, devouring the books I found in the small collection my parents had acquired from the estates of various relatives. One of my favourites was A Wonder Book, Nathaniel Hawthorne's retelling of classical myths. My favourite of those stories was The Miraculous Picture, the story of Baucis and Philemon. This elderly, poor but generous-hearted couple invite two gods disguised as beggars to come into their cottage to rest and eat. The gods keep asking that their bowls be replenished, and the old couple become sad and embarrassed because they know the pitcher's empty. But the gods show them otherwise. No matter how often they pour from the pitcher, it is always full. I suppose that as a child what I liked was the thought of possessing such a pitcher. Much later, I realised that in some sense, I did. The story of the miraculous pitcher seems to be telling us that in the realm of the spirit there is no such thing as a non-renewable resource. That's an important concept. Most of us have it backward. For centuries, we've had it backward. We have believed that material resources are infinite, but the resources of the spirit need to be hoarded with care. We act as if the supply of oil can go on forever, but that there are limits to the amount of love we can give away. How often have I found myself closing off from people in need because I was afraid of being spiritually drained, only to find myself in the driest of deserts. We have arrived at a time in our history when we are beginning to realise that this planet is our only home. We can no longer make a mess of the place where we are and then move on. A species can come to an end. Resources can be used up. All growth is not a sign of health. But I suspect we doubt more than ever the truth in the story of the miraculous pitcher, or the loaves and the fishes. We find it hard to believe that we will find the spiritual nourishment to meet the needs of this chaotic age. The wisdom of the centuries and our own experience tell us otherwise. If we do not let our fears have dominion, we may discover that in the midst of pain we find inner strength. In the midst of bewilderment we find inner clarity. In the midst of nourishing another, we find ourselves nourished. Let's join together again in a time of prayer. These words are by Kerry Mueller. Spirit of life, we are joined today in a moment of gratitude for a perfect autumn day, for a last blaze of sunshine in a sapphire sky before the rain and snow, for gold and crimson leaves before we are mired in piles of slush, for the moment of peace and contemplation in which to appreciate this rare beauty. This moment of perfection sharpens our love for an imperfect world. We are reminded of the many people in the world who are burdened by hunger and pain, by sorrow and anxiety, by violence and loss. And we pause this morning to share our concern and care for the people of the world living in fear and hardship. May they find comfort and peace, and may we find better ways of sharing the earth's resources and caring for all people. Closer to home, we think of those in the congregation, or in our families or circle of friends, who are suffering or sorrowing. May they too find comfort and peace. And may we find ways of supporting them and offering them our love and care. May we find it in ourselves today to work towards a better world. We are energized by the beauty of the day. May we make use of that energy to take part in the lifting of burdens. May our gratitude find expression in the care of others, both near and far. And may we find ways to bless the world. Let us share a time of quietness together now, as we bring our own silent prayers of joy and concern to the altar within our hearts. Let us be quiet together now. May our gratitude find expression in the care of others, both near and far. May we find ways to bless the world. Amen. Autumn can be a beautiful time of year. The flaming colours of the leaves, the silhouettes of trees against ice-blue skies. What's not to love? Well, aside from the high winds, rain, cold, and fallen leaves turning to mulch underfoot. But you know what I mean. It's also a very meaningful time of year, I find. Each season has its own metaphor. Spring is that of growing and new life. Summer is a time of abundance and vibrancy. Winter's the time of dormancy and waiting while the plants and animals gather their strength for the coming spring. Autumn is in many ways a time of mourning, as we see the green life around us fade and wither, and many of us can often be overtaken by a sense of melancholy as the nights draw in and the cold begins to settle into our bones. The metaphor of the sacrifice of the plants giving up their life so that in spring the cycle can begin again is a particularly strong one. It gets used sometimes around Remembrance Sunday, and I've even heard it used at funerals. The old who have passed on their wisdom and knowledge make way for the younger generations in much the way that the leaves pass on their goodness to the soil, ready to be taken up again and formed into new leaves. But it doesn't have to be used solely in relation to death. The metaphor of autumn can be applied to any sacrifice, any giving that another may bloom more brightly. and often it happens right in the very heart of life. There's a poem by Mark Stringer that dances around the edges of the metaphor. It's called As the Year Winds Down. It goes like this. As the year winds down to its close and we are submerged once again in the seasonal darkness we have come to know so well, we have reason to think back upon the year that was, if only because it will soon be gone. We think back to the friends we have made, the sorrow we have endured, the love we have found, the loneliness we have survived. We think back to the blessings of being forgiven and the gift we offered to ourselves when we forgave. We think back to those who listened to us in our times of need and the times we could have listened more. We think back to the things we traded for our time and to what we may have overlooked in the process. We think back to the times when we were afraid and uncertain and we trudged ahead anyway, and the times when we were compassionate, when we could have been cold. In this season of still growing night, may we see more clearly against the dark backdrop of our living the true light of our lives, the love we give to others, and the peace we nurture in ourselves. I've heard two different stories, both relating to the last leaf on the tree at the end of autumn. One speaks about the last leaf being so frightened about letting go and losing its security, not knowing where it will end, but eventually learning to fly through the wind and be absorbed into the soil and return again in the spring. The other tells of a walker who sees the one leaf hanging onto a poplar tree and is not ready to see it fall, wills it to hang on for as long as it can. We need both those attitudes in our lives at different times. We need the determination to hang on, even when we feel we'll be swept away by the winds of chaos. The commitment to keep going, even if everything seems a bit futile. But we also need to be brave enough to let go, and to give ourselves up to the calling that faces us. To give of ourselves now, so that something can grow in the future. To feed the soil, metaphorically, so that in time new shoots can come. Could be argued we've been doing a bit of that recently with the church building. For a long time we held on to what we had, grimly it may have felt at times, determined that we would keep going and not let go. Now we are letting go. That is, letting go of quite a lot of finances in order to feed the building. But we do so not in despair, but in hope that our feeding, our giving, will enable that church building to become the strong tree trunk which carries the strong branches, that allows new leaves to flourish in the years to come, by providing that nourishing base from which we will continue to offer who we are to the people of our local community, our own personal little tree of life. We do it with people too. There are times, hard times, when our friends need our help, or indeed we need help, just to hold on to existence. No thoughts of growth or change or flourishing, just a desperate need to hold fast to something that won't let us go. And we can offer that here. We can offer that firm base and strong arms to hold people steady while they are in the storms that life can throw at people. But once the storms have passed, continuing to just hold on will eventually be not enough. We need to let go. We need to give of ourselves to each other, to nourish each other and encourage that new growth of spirit. And sometimes it may feel that giving may well be the end of us, that we are too weak to spare anything more of ourselves, too fragile to risk dismantling who we are for an unknown result. But remember what our second reading said. For centuries, we have had it backward. We have believed that material resources are infinite, but the resources of the Spirit need to be hoarded with care. We act as if the supply of oil can go on forever, but that there are limits to the amount of love we can give away. How often have I found myself closing off from people in need because I was afraid of being spiritually drained, only to find myself in the driest of deserts. And again, if we do not let our fears have dominion, we may discover that in the midst of pain we find inner strength. In the midst of bewilderment we find inner clarity. In the midst of nourishing another, we find ourselves nourished. Thus, the story of the miraculous pitcher seems to be telling us that in the realm of the Spirit, there is no such thing as a non-renewable resource. And how is it that we have so much to give? For me, it's because of two things. Firstly, it's because we live in fellowship with each other, and that provides its own sustenance, the love and care and support that is an integral part of intentional community. And secondly, it is because at our very heart lies the source of all compassion. Some would call it God, others the divine. For me, it has no name, it just is. That strength that will never give out, the love that will never stop giving, the peace that can always be called on, if only we remember that it's there. Which brings us back round to community. For we can remind each other of who we truly are. While we hold each other tight through the bad times, we continually whisper to each other the truth about the depths within us. An endless cycle of holding on and letting go, of supporting and releasing, of feeding and of being fed. The circle of life turns, and it is a miraculous thing. And so, a blessing. These words are by Andrew Pakula. May you know, fully and deeply, the blessings of each of your heart's seasons. The inward turning of winter, springtime's lush renewal, the effortless, steady growth of summer, and autumn's rich harvest. May your passage from season to season be blessed, eased by hands to hold, and by the light of love to guide you on. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me once more. I hope you are keeping well. I know this whole situation is going on so much longer than we ever thought it would. But we are still here together. And so I'll see you, same time next week. You in your home, me in mine, together in our hearts. Stay safe, stay strong, and know that you are loved.